Alright, here we go. Here's our last bit of Chapter 5. This will cover the rest of the chapter, the last 11 pages. And this is going to lead us up to the Declaration of Independence. Yay, 1776! Okay, so let's start here. So, the Townsend duties are going to be repealed. So, people are going to throw up enough stink that the Townsend duties will be repealed. But what they don't repeal is the tax on tea. And so people are still going to be upset. The animosity is going to continue. Massachusetts radical patriots are going to organize committees of correspondence in 1772 to state the rights of the colonists in the provinces. The Tea Act of May 1773 is going to provide some relief, gave the company a government loan and canceled the English import duties on tea. But even though they're changing this, so what they do is they reduce the tax, but then they tell the people they can only buy British tea. So they're still not going to be very happy. So the Committees of Correspondence is going to organize resistance to the Tea Act. And on December 16th, 1773, the artisans and laborers and other peoples of the Sons of Liberty are going to dress themselves as Mohawk Indians, and they're going to throw tea into the harbor. Why they dress like Indians, I don't know. Where they got the Indian costumes is confusing. I'm not sure if they were in the back of the closet or something. And you can see from the picture right here, they're clearly not Indians. I mean, they're white. So they're not Indians. It's just a disguise, essentially. And basically, I guess, to call some attention to it. So in retaliation to our Boston Tea Party, they are going to put into place what is called the coercive acts. And when we say coercive means to force or to convince heavily people to follow things. So there are 4 parts to it. The first one says the Port Bill closed Boston Harbor. So basically Boston Harbor is closed down. It's one of the biggest ports in the colonies, and they're going to close down. The second one is going to annul the Massachusetts Colonies Charter. And they are going to prohibit town meetings. So basically, they're taken over. The Quartering Act is going to mandate new barracks for the British troops. So this is where we get the Third Amendment, not allowing British troops in our homes and whatnot. And the fourth one is the Justice Act. So basically, if you commit a crime or you're accused of committing a crime, you are transferred to either other colonies or in Great Britain. Again, reasons we have the amendments. You are allowed to have a jury of your peers. You're allowed to, you're supposed to have court wherever you commit the crime, that kind of stuff. But they would send them to Britain or to other colonies. And obviously, they are not going to get a fair trial at that point. The measures are called, the Patriots cleverly call them the Intolerable Acts. 1774, Parliament's going to pass the Quebec Act. Which I don't know why this is important, but it allows Roman Catholicism in Quebec and extends their boundaries into the Ohio River Valley. I don't know that that's really important to our study of the American Revolution, but there you know what it is, the Quebec Act. But the important thing is our Boston Tea Party, and again, you can see from the illustrations. And we're not talking tea bags like what we know them today. We're talking tea in like little things, and it was a lot of tea. It was a lot of tea that was thrown overboard, so it cost quite a bit of money. And there's another image right there. Okay, so in 1774, September 1774, there is going to be a meeting in Philadelphia. And this is going to be after, I think it's after Lexington and Concord. Well, either way. Yes. Lexington and Concord is in, hold on, I'm going to tell you, just give me a second. Oh, it's 1775. Okay, anyway, so they're going to have this meeting in 1774. 12 mainland colonies are going to meet in Philadelphia, and they're going to advocate a boycott. New Englanders want political union. They want defensive military plans. The Middle Atlantic colonies want political compromise. And these are men of loyal principles, and they propose a new system in which each colony would have an assembly plus representation in a continent-wide political body. The king would appoint a president general to preside over a legislative council selected by the colonial assemblies. It's going to fail by a single vote. A lot of people do want a Declaration of Rights and Grievances, calling for an end of the coercive acts, giving British only the limited control of trade. But they still don't want independence. They want to be treated fairly. They want their rights that they feel that they deserve as British citizens, because that is how they see themselves. They are going to threaten to cut off trade with Britain, Ireland, and the British West Indies if the coercive acts aren't repealed. But by September of they give them until September 1775. I think that's pretty generous. They have a whole year. Instead, Lord North is going to impose a naval blockade on American trade with foreign nations, and he's going to order General Gage to end resistance in Massachusetts. Okay, so we're just going to see how that plays out. So this is Independence Hall in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. You can see me in front of it. Yeah, not my best hair day, but oh well, such is life. But that is Independence Hall. That is the actual building that they signed the actual Declaration of Independence in. You can go visit it, as I did. So this is the entryway right there, where you come into the room. And then there are two rooms, one off to the left and one off to the right. So this one here is the pictured room on the left. And this one here is the room on the right. So in this hall, not only did they write and sign the Declaration of Independence, they also wrote and signed the Constitution. So it is a pretty historical location. That chair right there that you see towards the back of the picture in the center of the room, like on that pedestal there, is where George Washington sat to preside over the Second Continental Congress, which was the Constitutional, whatever it's called. But anyway, when they wrote the Constitution, he presided over it. So that is Independence Hall. You definitely should go visit if you ever get an opportunity. And I can't say my hair will get better in future pictures, but such is life. So anyway, there you go. Independence Hall. Great historical location. You should visit. All right. So as we are moving on our road to independence, farm families are starting to be very concerned about increasing taxes and their sons having to serve as part of the British military. Because not all these people are coming from Britain. I mean, you're going to have other, colonists and whatnot. Political consciousness of those in the countryside is going to be raised by urban rebellions of Boston and New York in the 1760s. 1774, the Continental Congress is going to establish the Continental Association to enforce another boycott of British goods. And they are quickly going to set up a rural network of committees to do its work. In rural Concord, Massachusetts, 80% of male heads of households supported non-importation, basically not getting in British goods. Patriots are going to try to convince the farmers that the British efforts in the colonies are going to hurt individual land ownership, which is already very difficult to do at this point. Southern slave owners are going to feel these British limitations on land west of the Appalachian Mountains are going to be a problem. Also, that legislation like the Coercive Acts could be used on other colonies. So recall the Boston Tea Party happens in Boston, Massachusetts. A lot of the boycotting happens there. And so the Coercive Acts are going to be specifically for Boston and for Massachusetts. So it is it's not a colony. All the colonies are part of these Coercive Acts. So you have to keep that in mind. There is going to be a lot of fear of anarchy. Both wealthy and poor can be loyal for varying reasons as far as the king goes. Tenant farmers are not going to like landlords, and they're going to support the king. Some are going to fear slave insurrections in support of the British. Historians estimate that some 15 to 20% of the white population was loyal to the crown. Loyalists were driven out of their homes or forced into silence. So this is going to happen a little later on, not necessarily from day one, not in 1770 or anything like that. But you will have, it's going to be even worse once the colonies win the war and it becomes the United States. Quakers are pacifists, and you also have a lot of Germans who are going to try and remain neutral because of their religious convictions. Most of them simply wanted to preserve their family's property and independence, no matter what the outcome. They just wanted to continue to be living their lives. All right, October 1772, the British revenue crisis is going to lead it to raze Fort Pitt. That means take it down, R-A-Z-E. That's going to leave colonial settlers exposed and vulnerable to the Ohio Indians. Pennsylvania and Virginia both are going to claim the region. Virginia's royal governor, the Earl of Dunmore, organizes a local militia to rebuild at the site of Fort Pitt. In the summer of 1774, Dunmore is going to defy both his royal instructions and the House of Burgesses in Virginia, calling out Virginia's militia, and leads a force of 2,400 men against the Ohio Shawnees. The battle at Point Pleasant defeats the Shawnees, and Dunmore's forces claimed the area of Kentucky as their own. So even though they've got all these battles with the British, they still have some battles going on with the Indians, and there are some other things going on. This right here, 1774-75, Braddock's Road and Forbes Road. And Braddock's dead at this point. He dies in the French and Indian War. All right. So, as they're kind of in Boston and whatnot, the General Gage, he's going to order the British troops to seize Patriot armories in Charlestown and Cambridge. You have an army of 20,000 militiamen who are going to mobilize to safeguard other military locations. Concord is going to raise a defensive force, and they will be called the Minutemen. And the reason they're called Minutemen is they were considered to be ready to fight in a minute. So they would generally go to bed with their clothing on, have their weapons nearby if they were called up, that they would be immediately ready to go. The British are going to claim that Massachusetts is in open rebellion, and they're going to order General Gage to march against the rude rabble. On the night of April 18th, 1775, General Gage dispatches 700 soldiers to capture colonial leaders and the supplies at Concord. So they're trying to get to the weapons and things that are in Concord, Massachusetts. Paul Revere, this is him in his famous ride, along with another gentleman whose name has been lost in history. No, I just can't remember right now. But Paul Revere gets all the credit, probably because he's this famous silversmith. But he's going to warn patriots of their impending arrival, you know, the riding, the British are coming, the British are coming. Militiamen are going to confront them at Lexington and Concord, and a handful of people die. And the reason we always call it Lexington and Concord is they're very close together. Militia from neighboring towns repeatedly ambushed retreating British soldiers. So initially they're going to fight them, and the British are going to show up in a line, and they will fight the actually, so right there up in that top right left hand, that's a depiction of the Battle of Lexington and Concord. And you can see the British are standing in lines to fight. And the colonists are just kind of everywhere. And once the British start retreating, the colonists are going to be like hiding in shrubbery and trees and stuff on the way back and just shooting at the British soldiers. So they'll kind of be picking people off as they're marching back in their red coats in lines. By the end of the day, you have 73 British soldiers that are dead, 174 are wounded, and 26 are missing. British fire had killed 49 colonial militiamen and wounded 39. So you can definitely see, despite the lack of numbers that the colonists had on their side, they definitely won those battles. They lost less people. And again, this is the first battle of what becomes the American Revolution. But they still have not decided to fight for independence yet. All right. This statue right here in this picture is in the town of Lexington. It's a Minuteman soldier. And you can see me there. Hair doesn't look much better. Yep. Oh well. It was not a good hair summer that year. All right, this is Concord. So that right there is the battle path, the road to battle, road to war. You have the sign there for the Old North Bridge, which I'll show you in just a second. And right there on the morning of April 19th, 1775, approximately 400 colonials stood on the hill overlooking the North Bridge. As smoke rose from Concord Center, the order to march was given. In the exchange of fire that followed, Captain Isaac Davis, who had exclaimed, "I haven't a man who is afraid to go," was killed together with Abner Hosmer and a private also from action. So this is a memorial that's there. That is, I think, on the next picture. Let's see. There's another sign about the Concord fight, the North Bridge. 3 companies of British regulars, about 96 men, guarding the North Bridge, opened fire upon 400 colonists advancing from the opposite side. Major John Buttrick of Concord then issued the fateful command, "Fire, fellow soldiers, for God's sake, fire." For the first time, colonists were ordered to fire upon the army of their king, and for the first time they killed British soldiers. Ralph Waldo Emerson, in his 1837 poem, The Concord Hymn, immortalized the event as the shot heard round the world. I'm sure you've heard that before, but that comes from Lexington and Concord and the battle that occurs there. These are some other monuments that are erected here. Again, here on the 19th of April, 1775 was made the first forcible resistance to British aggression. On the opposite bank stood the American militia. Here stood the invading army. And on this spot, the first of the enemy fell in the War of the Revolution, which gave independence in these United States. Let's see. By the rude bridge that arched the flood, their flag to April's breeze unfurled. Here once the embattled farmer stood and fired the shot heard round the world. So that's on that statue of that man right there. And that is on the opposite side of the bridge. And on the other side of his statue, it says 1775. It gives the date. And these things are, a lot of this was done in 1875 on the 100th anniversary of these battles. And this is the bridge. This is the Old North Bridge that you cross over. And you can see where I'm on both sides of the bridge here. So this right here is where the British stood. This right here is where the militiamen stood. And it's beautiful there. There's this little lake here that you're crossing over. Today you can go paddle boating on it, but there's just all this it's just this really remote area, and imagine even more so at that point in time. So I just wanted to give you some benefit of my travels and my weird selfies. So there you go. All right. So the Second Continental Congress is going to start organizing for war. Moderates are going to hope for peace and reconciliation with the king. They want to repeal the oppressive measures. You also have radical patriots, so Sam Adams, Patrick Henry. They definitely want to take up arms. Radicals gain support for an invasion of Canada. Merchants are going to cut off exports to Britain and West Indies colonies. You have local skirmishes between the Loyalists and the Patriots in southern colonies. November 1775, Lord Dunmore in Virginia promised freedom to slaves and indentured servants who joined Britain in the war. Fears grow that the lower class would rebel against the Patriots. They are going to plan a meeting in 1776 of the Continental Congress and resolve to support independence. So Kentucky, 1775, in the wake of Dunmore's war, settlers are going to start to occupy newly won lands of Kentucky. They're going to petition Virginia's rebel government, asking it to create a new county that would include the Kentucky settlements. 1776, Virginia agreed and sent arms and ammunition to Kentucky so that settlers could join the fight against Britain. So the fight is picking up by 1776. Thomas Paine will be the first one to officially call for independence. He writes his pamphlet, Common Sense. It's addressed to the inhabitants of America on the following subjects: of the origin and design of government in general, with concise remarks on the English Constitution; of monarchy and hereditary succession; thoughts on the present state of American affairs; and of the present ability of America, with some miscellaneous reflections. So written by an Englishman. All right. Americans are still very divided, but they are increasingly turning against the king. I mean, at this point, it's kind of a civil war. The colonies are fighting against their own countrymen, so to say, because they really believed at this point that they're British, and they don't really start to embrace the American identity until they start with this Declaration of Independence. So Thomas Paine's pamphlet's going to call for independence, Republican form of government. He is going to speak poorly against the monarchy, and he's going to start to convince people to get behind the independence movement. So he will be instrumental in that. And you will eventually get the convention that will write the Declaration. And they are closed up in this little room. They are basically committing an act of treason. And if they don't win this war that is being fought, likely many of these men will die because the British government will likely hang them or kill them in some way for committing crimes against the British government. So those men are very lucky they won, but it is considered a form of treason because they are speaking against their current government, which is the British government. So July 4th, 1776, the Declaration was approved. It was written by Thomas Jefferson. There are definitely places where other people assisted. They vilify the king. They're going to use Enlightenment thinking to proclaim the rights of men. They're going to link individual liberty, popular sovereignty, and the Republican government. And so this is when independence is declared on July 4th, 1776. And at this point, the reasons people are fighting the war will definitely change. Initially, it's just kind of against their British aggressor. Now it's fighting for independence. They're going to be fighting for independence and looking to win this war. All right, so that is the end of Chapter 5, but I did want to show you, this is some stuff I saw this past summer. So the other pictures I showed you was from 2017. This is from the summer. This is, so I showed you the Boston Massacre picture. This is in the same room actually as that. So it's an original engraving of it's an original copy of the Declaration of Independence. So to create the engraving, they literally took the original Declaration of Independence and copied it from there using the ink from there. And so this is one of the original copies. It is actually much more legible than the Declaration of Independence is because, like I said, they actually used the original Declaration and kind of transferred ink to make the engravings, to make the copies. Over there on the right, that is Jefferson's standing desk, and it is his that he owned, and many people think that he wrote the Declaration of Independence there. But even if he didn't actually write the Declaration of Independence there, he did write many documents. It was in his home. And that is pretty effing cool, in my opinion, to have been so close to something that has even the thought of such great documents being written on it that have really shaped our country. So there you go, Jefferson's desk, copies of the Declaration. Your next chapter is going to talk about the Revolutionary War, and we will move on from there. So I hope you have a great morning, afternoon, evening, and I will catch up with you soon. Bye.